The duration of human relationships. Sociologists like Worth have referred in passing to the transitory nature of human ties in urban society, but they have made no systematic effort to relate the shorter duration of human ties to shorter durations in other kinds of relationships. Nor have they attempted to document the progressive decline in these durations. Until we analyse the temporal character of human bonds, we will completely misunderstand the move towards super-industrialism. For one thing, the decline in the average duration of human relationships is a likely corollary of the increase in the number of such relationships. The average urban individual today probably comes into contact with more people in a week than the feudal villager did in a year, perhaps even a lifetime. The villager's ties with other people no doubt included some transient relationships, but most of the people he knew were the same throughout his life. The urban man may have a core group of people with whom his interactions are sustained over long periods of time, but he also interacts with hundreds, perhaps thousands of people whom he may see only once or twice and who then vanish into anonymity. All of us approach human relationships as we approach other kinds of relationships, with a set of built-in durational expectancies. We expect that certain kinds of relationships will endure longer than others. It is in fact possible to classify relationships with other people in terms of their expected duration. These vary, of course, from culture to culture and from person to person. Nevertheless, throughout wide sectors of the population of the advanced technological societies, something like the following order is typical. Long duration relationships. We expect ties with our immediate family and to a lesser extent with other kin to extend throughout the lifetimes of the people involved. This expectation is by no means always fulfilled, as rising divorce rates and family breakups indicate. Nevertheless, we still theoretically marry until death do us part, and the social ideal is a lifetime relationship. Whether this is a proper or a realistic expectation in a society of high transience is debatable. The fact remains, however, that family links are expected to be long-term, if not lifelong, and considerable guilt attaches to the person who breaks off such a relationship. Medium duration relationships. 4 classes of relationship fall within this category, roughly in order of descending durational expectancies. These are relationships with friends, neighbours, job associates, and co-members of churches, clubs, and other voluntary organisations. Friendships are traditionally supported to survive almost, if not quite, as long as family ties. Friendships are traditionally supposed to survive almost, if not quite, as long as family ties. The culture places high value on old friends, and a certain amount of blame attaches to dropping a friendship. One type of friendship relationship, however, acquaintanceship, is recognised as less durable. Neighbour relationships are no longer regarded as long-term commitments. The rate of geographical turnover is too high. They are expected to last as long as the individual remains in a single location, an interval that is growing shorter and shorter on average. Breaking off with a neighbour may involve other difficulties, but it carries no great burden of guilt. On-the-job relationships frequently overlap friendships and less often neighbour relationships. Traditionally, particularly among white-collar professional and technical people, job relationships were supposed to last a relatively long time. This expectation, however, is also changing rapidly, as we shall see. Co-membership relationships. Links with people in church or civic organisations, political parties and the like sometimes flower into friendship, but until that happens, such individual associations are regarded as more perishable than either friendships, ties with neighbours or fellow workers. Short duration relationships. Most, though not all, service relationships fall into this category. These involve sales clerks, delivery people, gas station attendants, milkmen, barbers, hairdressers, etc. The turnover among these is relatively rapid, and little or no shame attaches to the person who terminates such a relationship. Exceptions to the service pattern are professionals such as physicians, lawyers, and accountants, with whom relationships are expected to be somewhat more enduring. This categorisation is hardly airtight. Most of us can cite some service relationships that have lasted longer than some friendships, job or nation relationship or neighbour relationship. Moreover, most of us can cite a number of quite long-lasting friendships in our own lives. Perhaps we've been going to the same doctor for years or have maintained extremely close ties with a college friend. Such cases are hardly unusual, but they are relatively few in number in our lives. They are like long-stemmed flowers towering above a field of grass in which each blade represents a short-term relationship, a transient contact. It is the very durability of these ties that makes them noticeable. Such exceptions do not invalidate the rule. They do not change the key fact that, across the board, the average interpersonal relationship in our life is shorter and shorter in duration. The hurry up welcome. Continuing urbanisation is merely one of a number of pressures driving us towards greater temporariness in our human relationships. Urbanisation, as suggested earlier, brings great masses of people into close proximity, thereby increasing the actual number of contacts made. This process is, however, strongly reinforced by the rising geographical mobility described in the last chapter. Geographical mobility not only speeds up the flow of places through our lives, but the flow of people as well. The increase in travel brings with it a sharp increase in the number of transient, casual relationships with fellow passengers, with hotel clerks, with taxi drivers, airline reservation people, with porters, maids, waiters, colleagues, and friends of friends, with customs officials, travel agents, and countless others. The greater the mobility of the individual, the greater the number of brief face-to-face encounters, human contacts, each one a relationship of sorts, fragmentary and above all compressed in time. Such contacts appear natural and unimportant to us. We seldom stop to consider how few of the 66 billion human beings who preceded us on the planet ever experienced this high rate of transience in their human relationships. If travel increases the number of contacts, largely with service people of one sort or another, residential relocation also steps up the throughput of people in our lives. Moving leads to the termination of relationships in almost all categories. The young submarine engineer who is transferred from his job in the Navy Yard at Mare Island, California, to the installation at Newport News, Virginia, takes only his most immediate family with him. He leaves behind parents and in-laws, neighbours, service and tradespeople, as well as his associates on the job and others. He cuts short his ties. In settling down in the new community, he, his wife and child must initiate a whole cluster of new and once more temporary relationships. Here is how one young wife, a veteran of 11 moves in the past 17 years, describes the process. When you live in a neighbourhood, you watch a series of changes take place. One day a new mailman delivers the mail. A few weeks later the girl at the checkout counter at the supermarket disappears and a new one takes her place. Next thing you know, the mechanic at the gas station is replaced. Meanwhile, a neighbour moves out next door and a new family moves in. These changes are taking place all the time, but they are gradual. When you move, you break all of these ties at once and you have to start all over again. You have to find a new paediatrician, a new dentist, a new car mechanic who won't cheat you, and you quit all your organisations and start over again. It is the simultaneous rupture of a whole range of existing relationships that makes relocation psychologically taxing for many. The more frequently this cycle repeats itself, of course, in the life of an individual, the shorter the duration of the relationships involved. Among significant sectors of the population, this process is now occurring so rapidly that it is drastically altering traditional notions of time with respect to human relationships. At a cocktail party, reads a story in the New York Times the other night, the talk got around to how long these at the party had lived in New Canaan. To nobody's surprise, it developed that the couple of longest residents had been there 5 years. In slower moving times and places, 5 years constituted little more than a breaking in period for a family move to a new community. It took that long to be accepted. Today, the breaking in period must be highly compressed in time. Thus, we have in many American suburbs a commercial welcome wagon service that accelerates the process by introducing newcomers to the chief stores and agencies in the community.